Welcome back for Chapter 8, video number 3. Start off with the joke, which is going to be the theme of this video about Teddy Roosevelt. So, the joke, why was Teddy Roosevelt so mean to horses? The answer, he was a Rough Rider. So, I know, as always, take it in. You know, this is why I put the picture of Teddy Roosevelt, because you guys are probably also laughing at how awesome, how great that joke was. But now to get back to talk a little bit about his life. And Teddy Roosevelt, there's a lot of really cool stories. There's some sad ones as well that we'll get to. But overall, just a ton of experience in politics, and he did many different things. We've talked about him with the Spanish-American War with the Rough Riders. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He served in the New York State Legislature. While he was serving in the New York State Legislature, is probably one of the saddest stories I've heard, especially as a president, that his mother died. A few hours after his mother died, his wife also died. And to make matters even worse, that was 2 days after the birth of one of his daughters. So really, there's a lot of tragedy, and after that tragedy, he put all of his effort essentially into politics. And as he was running for president, not a lot of Republicans liked him. And the reason they didn't like him, he was kind of outspoken. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind. And overall, they just didn't want him to become president. So they thought, in order to not make him president, let's have him serve as the VP. So he's going to serve as the vice president for William McKinley. And the reason they do this, I know you're kind of thinking that's a strange and kind of a lofty goal to do that. Out of all the vice presidents, only 14 of them have gone on to become president. And out of those 14, 8 of them became president due to resignation or death. Now, the one kind of glaring mistake with that is, if the president dies, who's going to take over? It's going to be the vice president. It's going to be Teddy Roosevelt. And that's what's going to happen. William McKinley, he is assassinated. And after his assassination, as we know, the line of succession, Vice President Teddy Roosevelt now is elevated to the position of being the president. So, as it says, he becomes the youngest president at age 42. And he's going to change the way that the presidency is looked at throughout U.S. history. One of the first things he wants to do is he wants to make sure that trusts, and he's explaining this word here, trusts, were not dishonest. Now, a trust, essentially what that is going to mean, it's a corporation, or if it's a group of businesses, they pool all their resources and put it into one company, and it destroys competition. And the reason that they do this is, if there's no competition, you have a monopoly. And think about that board game that you all love to play, and then you hate it a few minutes later once you start to lose. Once there's a monopoly, you control all the prices. So he thinks that they're efficient because it's going to help the economy as a whole, but he does not want them to abuse their power. So he is going to be coined as a trust buster. I know I'm kind of skipping around here, but he makes an example out of J.P. Morgan. We talked about him before, just how wildly successful he was. But J.P. Morgan, he was going to start a trust in the Northwest. And they were going to create the Northern Securities, which is going to be a railroad company, and they were going to be the only ones to operate in the Northwest. And the reason that is so, not really unorthodox, but why it was feared so much is farmers, businesses, if they're going to try to transport anything, it's going to go through the Northern Securities. And because there's no competition, what do you think Northern Securities is going to do to the price? Way up. So because of that, J.P. Morgan, he is going to have to go to federal court, and it's going to be started by Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt goes to his attorney general and tells him, well, you need to file a lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act. J.P. Morgan responds to Teddy Roosevelt and asks him, well, what can I do to fix it? Roosevelt does not respond. He wants to make an example out of the most influential person in U.S. history. So they are going to take his railroad holding company and make him break it up. So he is going to lose a lot of money over that. He's going to be coined as a trust buster. The other thing he's going to do, the coal strike of 1902. And this is going to be important because it has a lot to do with our economy. And really, the presidencies before this, they kind of, I don't know if you want to say they all believed in laissez-faire, but they were kind of hands-off. Now, Teddy Roosevelt wants to be as hands-on as possible with the economy. And this is going to be very evident in the J.P. Morgan case that we just talked about, but also in the coal strike of 1902. So the United Mine Workers, they launch a strike in Pennsylvania, and over 150,000 workers, they go on strike. So this mine, and basically the entire union, they are not working. They are cut off. And this, I mean, it hurts the business, absolutely, but really it's going to hurt the country as a whole, because if they are not mining that anthracite, they're not mining that hard coal, then factories can't run, first of all, and secondly, homes are not going to be heated. So they're worried about a coal shortage, and they're trying to figure out a way that they can prevent this coal shortage from happening. So Roosevelt, he's going to step in as one of the most influential leaders. He's very hard-headed. He is very, very intelligent. He argues for arbitration, which we've talked about that before. Essentially, it's going to be a middleman comes in. They're going to hear the owners, and they're going to hear the side of the workers, and then they're going to make a decision. But the owners, they do not approve. They're millionaires. They can wait this out. They can still make money. So Roosevelt argues for this arbitration. Owners say, nope, not going to happen. Roosevelt's not okay with that. He was furious. He was probably as mad as he can be. So what he does, he threatens to use the army. He is going to bring the army in. He is going to make the coal kind of nationalized. They are going to run the mines. The government's also going to make the profit. Owners kind of back off. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't do this. I have the army, says Roosevelt. I can kind of do what I want in this situation. So the owners eventually are going to start to give in, and that's just really going to help out the legacy of Teddy Roosevelt. And then lastly, talking more about his legacy, one of his biggest missions, I know I talked about the economy a lot, but one of his biggest initiatives was environmental reform. He wanted to make sure that the same scientific standards that were used for the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, that they were also going to be used for the landscape of the United States. So environmental reform is just absolutely going to be one of the biggest impacts that he has on America at that time. And with that, he creates what's known as the Newlands Reclamation Act. And again, you don't have to write that down. Just put it in your own words. But federal funds from public land sales are going to pay for irrigation and land development projects. So he's not necessarily going to say we can't get the natural resources from those areas. But what he is trying to imply is if we are going to get those natural resources, it needs to be monitored by the government. The money needs to go to the government. It's going to help out the many that way versus just one private company. And as a president, and every president does this from now on, he uses the White House as what he calls the bully pulpit. And that means that anytime he wants to make a speech, he can make a speech. He is the most influential person in the United States. The president is the leader of the executive branch. He is just going to use that overall as a means of communication. Whenever he speaks, people listen. And he realizes that the White House has that power, and he is going to use that power for his benefit.